I want you to take a second and just visualize your current business plan.
Yeah. Picture that foundational document you rely on.
Right. Whether you're, bootstrapping a startup in your garage or steering the corporate strategy for a massive multinational conglomerate.
Just hold that image in your mind.
Is it a static, dusty PDF sitting in a forgotten folder on your desktop?
Probably.
Or a collection of overly optimistic bullet points that your team glances at maybe once a quarter?
Right.
Or, and this is the real question, is it a living, breathing entity capable of dynamically adapting to a hostile environment?
For the vast majority of professionals, it is universally the former.
Yeah.
It's a snapshot, frozen in time, completely unequipped to handle the realities of a shifting market.
Which is a fundamental vulnerability. So today, the mission of our deep dive is to explore a framework that completely shatters that static model.
It really does.
We are going to look at how the biological principles of DNA literal genetics can revolutionize enterprise design.
It's a massive paradigm shift.
Definitely. And our sources for this exploration include an overarching framework document detailing Project BNA.
That stands for Business Nucleotide Architecture, by the way.
Right, Project BNA. But even better than the official document, we have the raw, unedited transcripts of the brainstorming sessions between the creator and a colleague.
Which is incredibly to read.
It really gives us this fly-on-the-wall perspective of exactly how this radical concept was forged. I'm excited to get into this.
Me too. To give you the foundational context here, this framework was developed by Dr. Carlton Johnson.
Widely referred to in the source material as Doc C.
Exactly, Doc C. And he serves as the managing director of the Spectrix Metaphysical Institute.
Which sounds very sci-fi, I know.
It does, yeah. But Project BNA is a proprietary conceptual framework that sits within a much broader, highly ambitious system called Spectrix Forever.
Right, and that overarching system is dedicated to studying how complex systems manage to achieve structural stability while simultaneously adapting to intense external pressure.
Whether we're talking about personal energy grids, ecological biomes, or in this specific case, massive institutional structures.
So we're going to translate all of this dense corporate strategy into an incredibly intuitive biological analogy.
We want to give you those profound aha moments without the typical information overload.
Because when you see how Doc C maps the literal building blocks of life onto a standard business model, it permanently alters how you view a quarterly strategy meeting.
It changes everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. Just as biological DNA encodes the rules and the blueprints for living systems, business nucleotide architecture reimagines a business not as a list of departments, but as a structured, constantly evolving organism.
The source material argues pretty forcefully that treating a company as a collection of siloed divisions is a fatal error.
It just doesn't work long term.
No. It has to be a living structural system. And Doc C establishes 3 foundational principles to ensure this biological transition actually works. The first is structural coherence. In the brainstorming transcripts, there's this great moment where Doc C is frantically underlining the word alignment on a whiteboard.
Yeah, you can really feel his energy in the transcript.
Totally. He argues that just like a healthy biological body, an organization must maintain absolute internal alignment.
Your operational processes, your technological infrastructure, and your human capital structures.
Right. They must be physiologically linked to sustain resilience and long-term performance.
And that structural coherence is the underlying reason why a company can, boast record profits one quarter and completely collapse the next.
Exactly.
Because if the underlying technology isn't aligned with the human resources managing it, the core simply rots from the inside out.
To structural failure. Moving to the second foundational principle, we have strategic replication.
Which is fascinating.
The biological equivalent here is cellular division. Effective organizational patterns, like a highly successful product launch or a streamlined onboarding process, need to be encoded into the company's DNA.
And reproduce flawlessly across new ventures or entirely different initiatives.
Right. This mechanism allows an enterprise to scale its strategic intelligence without degrading its structural integrity. You literally replicate the code that works.
Scaling without losing the structural integrity that made you successful in the first place is basically the holy grail for any enterprise.
Oh, absolutely.
You aren't just getting bigger, you are perfectly replicating your strongest traits.
And the third foundational principle is adaptive evolution. Organizations must be inherently capable of responding intelligently to environmental pressures.
We're talking about sweeping regulatory changes, volatile market shifts, or sudden technological disruption.
A business has to absorb and survive those external forces while preserving the coherence of its core architecture.
To actually execute this biological translation, Doc C brings in a legendary cornerstone of business theory.
Michael Porter's value chain,
Yes, and he attempts to map it directly onto the building blocks of DNA.
which is brilliant.
So if we take Porter's 5 primary value-creating activities, inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and Service Doc C treats these as the actual chemical bases.
The nucleotide.
Right, the nucleotides. They aren't just abstract departments anymore. They're the molecular units responsible for transferring value through the corporate organism.
But if you remember your high school biology, there's a glaring structural flaw with that mapping.
A big one, yeah.
Biological DNA only utilizes 4 nucleotides: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. But Porter's value chain relies on 5 primary activities.
Reading the brainstorming transcripts, you can vividly feel the frustration in the room when they hit this wall.
It's palpable.
You have Doc C and his colleague trying to force a 5-piece puzzle into a 4-slot frame.
Right, because in real biological DNA, nucleotides come in very specific, rigid pairs to form the rungs of the ladder.
Exactly. If you have 5 corporate nucleotides, the math simply doesn't work. One activity is always left floating without a partner.
The transcript reveals an incredibly elegant solution to this discrepancy, though. Instead of trying to force standard, unnatural pairs.
Or just eliminating one of Porter's crucial activities, which would break the business model.
Right, they decided to completely restructure the geometry. They designated one of those primary activities as the universal connector.
And that universal connector is operations.
Operations fundamentally becomes the backbone of the entire model.
Which makes so much sense.
It does. The other 4 nucleotides, inbound logistics, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and service, they don't pair with each other in the traditional sense anymore.
Instead, they all branch off and anchor directly back into operations.
Viewing operations as the central, beating heart of the company makes perfect structural sense. It's the core nexus that physically links the inbound materials to the outbound product.
It's the engine that actually delivers on the lofty promises made by the marketing team. And it fundamentally dictates the quality of the service the customer eventually receives. It forces the value to flow sequentially through the center of the enterprise.
Grounding the biological metaphor in this structural business reality highlights the absolute central role of operational coherence.
Because if operations fails or becomes bottlenecked, the connections to all the other nucleotides are immediately severed.
The entire DNA strand breaks down.
Total system failure.
What's fascinating here is how the framework addresses the rest of the DNA structure. Once they established the primary nucleotides in the transcript, they realized they'd only built the rungs of the ladder.
Right.
But biological DNA is not just a stack of floating rungs. It relies on 2 long structural sides holding the entire sequence together.
If the primary value-creating activities serve as the rungs, the supporting activities form those 2 crucial structural strands.
And Doc C pulls from the second half of Michael Porter's model for this.
Utilizing the 4 supporting activities: firm infrastructure, human resource management, technology development, and procurement.
This is where the framework demands incredibly rigorous, intentional design. You cannot simply stack these supporting activities randomly on the sides of your ladder.
In the transcripts, there's a great moment of friction where Doc C's colleague practically shouts, "We can't just shove HR next to procurement without a catalyst."
I loved that part. That specific argument led them to establish 3 ironclad rules for how these supporting activities line up and pair on either side of the helix.
Let's walk through those pairing rules.
The first rule is complementarity. You must pair supporting activities that share a fundamental internal purpose.
Okay.
For example, pairing human resource management directly with firm infrastructure. Both of these strands are fundamentally tasked with maintaining the internal organization, managing the people, and keeping the lights on. They complement each other's mission.
So if complementarity is about a shared internal purpose, how does the framework handle departments that have entirely different day-to-day functions but still rely on each other to keep the business moving?
That brings us to the second rule: dependency. You pair activities that functionally rely on one another to execute their tasks.
Like what?
The prime example in the source material is the pairing of technology development and procurement.
Okay.
An organization cannot develop new, cutting-edge technological capabilities without a procurement department actively acquiring the necessary external hardware, software licenses, or specialized consulting expertise. One strand physically cannot function without the other.
And the final rule is synergies. You pair activities that actively reinforce and amplify one another.
Right.
Putting human resource management alongside technology development creates a massive synergy. Whenever you develop a proprietary new technology, you simultaneously need HR to train and manage the employees to effectively leverage that tool.
The synergy between those two functions significantly strengthens that entire section of the DNA strand.
The visual of this is striking. You have operations running down the absolute center, your primary activities branching off to form the robust rungs, and these meticulously paired supporting activities holding the entire ladder together.
It's a beautiful structure.
But a flat ladder lying on the ground is just a 2D snapshot. A business exists in time. The major conceptual breakthrough in their brainstorming session is when they realize they need to add motion to the model.
The transition from a static 2D ladder to a dynamic 3D double helix.
Yes.
The 2D ladder represents the business plan on paper, but as soon as you implement that plan, you introduce the element of time and iterative progress.
The twisting of the helix represents that iterative planning and execution. With every new financial quarter, every product iteration, every major strategic initiative, the ladder physically twists.
As it turns, those supporting activities on the outside strands are forced to interact with new primary activities on the inside.
By the time you reach the top of the helix, you don't have a flat, linear list of corporate goals. You have a fully formed, dynamic 3D structure where every single department has interacted with and balanced every other department.
That balanced stability is vital because, returning to the principle of adaptive evolution, the environment surrounding this 3D helix is incredibly hostile and never static.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the chaos of the real world.
Okay.
What happens when aggressive external forces grab that perfectly balanced 3D business helix and start twisting it with massive tension or torque it in a completely unnatural direction?
The overarching framework document categorizes 4 major external pressures capable of causing severe structural stress to the corporate DNA.
And these are things every business faces.
Exactly. Market conditions, such as a sudden, brutal economic recession or a massive overnight shift in consumer behavior. The regulatory environment sweeping new legislation or strict industry compliance standards.
Technological advancements, too. A disruptive new artificial intelligence platform launches and instantly renders your entire operational workflow obsolete.
And finally, societal trends, fundamental shifts in cultural norms or demographic aging.
Any single one of those external pressures can completely shatter a traditional, rigid business plan. But the BNA model features a built-in biological defense mechanism.
Because it's modeled on living genetics, it possesses a methodology to heal its own structural damage. They call it the ARU.
The Adaptive Response Unit.
This represents a massive conceptual leap in organizational design. If a specific section of the business DNA is damaged or strained by an external pressure, the business literally splices in a custom-built ARU to repair the helix and adapt to the new reality.
The brainstorming transcripts outline a phenomenal case study for this, focusing on the threat of overregulation.
It's a very practical example.
Imagine a sweeping new data privacy law passes globally, making your core marketing and data collection services incredibly difficult to execute legally.
A traditional company reacts with blind panic.
They convene a dozen frantic executive meetings and likely just slap a clumsy, expensive compliance band-aid over the problem.
But under the BNA framework, you methodically custom engineer an ARU and splice it directly into the affected area of your corporate DNA.
And that specific ARU designed for overregulation would be structurally robust. It would include a legal analysis nucleotide, specifically coded to interpret the exact parameters of the new privacy requirements.
It would feature a risk management nucleotide designed to audit data touchpoints and mitigate operational exposure.
And these primary nucleotides would be supported by a compliance ladder structure, ensuring that the day-to-day data procedures actually conform to the new legal standards.
You are literally engineering a brand new piece of genetic code designed exclusively to survive the hostile new environment and seamlessly inserting it into the business organism.
But a massive question arises in the transcripts during this phase. How do you determine exactly where to splice this new genetic code?
You can't just shove a massive new compliance division into the middle of a company and pray it doesn't disrupt the existing workflow.
Right. Identifying the insertion point is treated as a rigorous science within the BNA model, completely devoid of guesswork. They utilize a diagnostic process called sensitivity analysis to pinpoint the optimal splice location.
Yes.
Walk us through the four measurable factors of that sensitivity analysis, applying them to our data privacy regulation scenario.
First, you measure risk exposure. You mathematically audit the entire DNA strand to assess exactly where the business is most vulnerable to the new data laws. Are the marketing nucleotides collecting unauthorized data, or is the outbound logistics strand sharing addresses improperly?
Second is resource allocation. You calculate the exact capital, software, and manpower required to implement the ARU.
You have to ensure that funding the new compliance software doesn't financially starve the marketing or operations nucleotides.
So you locate the vulnerability and budget the cure.
But
What about tracking its success?
that is the third factor, performance metrics. You establish highly specific key performance indicators to monitor the ARU once it's spliced in. You track the immediate drop in compliance violations or the speed of legal audits.
Finally, you run scenario analysis. Before making the physical change, you run simulations on multiple potential outcomes.
You model what happens if you splice the ARU directly into the IT strand versus embedding it into the legal framework. It identifies the absolute optimal location for long-term stability.
The sheer rigor of that process is incredible. It completely removes the emotion, the panic, and the reactive decision-making from corporate crisis management.
You're operating as a corporate geneticist, identifying a mutation or a threat in the market, synthesizing a precise cure and splicing it in.
But for the listener sitting at their desk right now, how does this futuristic, highly myological concept translate to practical reality? How do you hand a DNA helix to an investor or a bank board when you are pitching for Series A funding?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the profound genius of DocC's project BNA is that it was never designed to replace the traditional expected business plan format.
It's designed to overlay it perfectly.
Exactly. In the latter half of the transcripts, they explicitly take this biological model and map it onto the standard sections of a traditional, frankly boring business plan.
The executive summary, the company description, market analysis, product or service offerings, marketing and sales strategy, the financial plan, the operations plan, and the management team breakdown.
Every single one of those legacy document sections corresponds flawlessly to a specific component of the BNA helix.
Your market analysis actively identifies the external pressures and the environmental threats.
The operations plan serves as your universal connector backbone.
The management team and the financial plan function as your vital supporting strands, physically holding the structural integrity of the enterprise together.
So what does this all mean for you?
Why should you invest the time to view your standard corporate strategy through the lens of business nucleotide architecture?
It means that by applying this framework, you force yourself to ensure that every single department, every solitary nucleotide, and every structural support system is fundamentally interconnected.
It completely eradicates the silo mentality that plagues modern business.
Under the BNA model, you can no longer tolerate a marketing team that doesn't intimately understand the limitations of the supply chain.
Or an HR department that operates completely disconnected from the technology development timeline.
The biology dictates that if one strand isn't perfectly paired with its functional complement, the entire helix destabilizes and the organism suffers.
You are no longer just drafting a stagnant document to appease a board of directors. You are actively engineering a resilient, highly responsive corporate organism.
You are building a system from day one that is biologically predisposed to survive environmental shock, adapt to chaos, and flawlessly replicate its own success.
And this raises an incredibly important question, a final provocative thought to leave you with that builds directly on the trajectory of Doc C and his team's research.
If we fully embrace the ultimate logical conclusion of business nucleotide architecture,
If enterprises can truly operate as living genetic code, capable of utilizing sensitivity analysis to diagnose their own structural stress and repairing themselves with custom adaptive response units,
could the near future of the enterprise be entirely self-regulating?
expanding the biology into automation.
Imagine a massive corporation whose entire BNA framework is natively integrated with an advanced artificial intelligence system.
An AI that continuously monitors global market conditions, real-time regulatory shifts, and emerging societal trends.
When a massive disruption hits, the AI automatically identifies the genetic mutation in the market.
It instantly engineers the appropriate ARU, runs millions of scenario analysis simulations in seconds, and physically splices the new operational protocols into the company's DNA in real time.
The business model evolves and heals itself instantly. without a human executive ever needing to schedule a single crisis management meeting.
A completely self-healing, self-evolving corporate entity. That concept is equal parts terrifying and absolutely brilliant.
It really is.
And it all begins with the realization that your foundational business plan shouldn't just be a forgotten PDF on a hard drive. It should be living, breathing genetic code. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. We highly encourage you to take these biological principles, analyze your own current projects, and start twisting that flat ladder into a dynamic helix. Catch you on the next deep dive.